Piper Olson, a name as melodic and vibrant as the historic city she called home, Annapolis, Maryland. At 24, I felt as though I was truly blossoming into the woman I had always envisioned, navigating life with a quiet confidence that resonated with the steady rhythm of the city. My apartment, nestled on a quiet, cobblestone street just a stone's throw from the historic State Circle, was a sanctuary of soft light and creativity. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the carefully curated collection of local art and vintage finds that adorned my space, casting dancing patterns on the polished hardwood floors. I loved the way the morning light greeted me, a daily invitation to embrace the world with a sense of wonder and purpose. My days were filled with the fulfilling work of a freelance graphic designer. I reveled in the intricate dance of colors and fonts, transforming abstract ideas into tangible visual stories for local businesses and burgeoning artists. It was a career that allowed me the freedom to set my own hours, to sip my morning coffee on my small balcony overlooking the tranquil street, listening to the distant clang of boat rigging from the harbor, a soothing backdrop to my creative process. My evenings were often spent lost in the pages of a good book, or enjoying lively discussions with my small, tight-knit circle of friends. We'd gather at a cozy waterfront cafe, sharing stories and laughter, feeling the gentle breeze carry the scent of salt and seafood. Sometimes, we'd venture out to explore the quiet trails of Quiet Waters Park, the rustle of fallen leaves beneath our feet, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant sounds of the bay. I was a firm believer in balance, in the steady cultivation of a life that was both intellectually stimulating and emotionally nurturing. I thought I had a strong grasp on the intricacies of human nature, especially when it came to relationships. My previous romantic experiences, though never leading to lasting love, had always concluded with a sense of mutual respect and understanding. There were no dramatic exits, no lingering bitterness, just a quiet acknowledgement that some paths were simply not meant to intertwine forever. This history led me to believe in the fundamental goodness of people, in their inherent capacity for honesty and integrity, even in the messy landscape of romance. I considered myself an empathetic soul, always willing to listen, to understand, to offer forgiveness rather than harbor resentment. I saw this as a strength, a testament to my character, a reflection of the open heart I carried through the world. Little did I know, this very openness, this willingness to trust unconditionally, would soon become my most glaring vulnerability, a chasm through which the serpent of deceit would slither, leaving a viscous trail of poison in its wake. My serene and carefully constructed life, a canvas of peace and predictability, was about to be violently torn apart, not by my own choices but by the calculated cruelty of another. This destructive force would come in the form of Mark, a man who had once held a significant, if not central, place in my heart. He was a military man, serving in the army, and our relationship had run its course a while back, ending amicably, or so I had genuinely believed. The demands of his service, the frequent relocations, and the general uncertainties of military life had seemed like insurmountable obstacles at the time, leading to a quiet, mutual parting of ways. There were no harsh words, no dramatic scenes, just a gentle fading of what we once were, a quiet acceptance of divergent paths. Life moved on, and I embraced my newfound independence, focusing on my career and personal growth. But then, as the whispers of his impending deployment began to circulate through mutual acquaintances, something shifted. A message appeared, tentative at first, a simple "Hey, how have you been?" from Mark. I responded politely, surprised but not unwelcoming. This casual exchange quickly blossomed. Soon, it wasn't just texts. It was long, rambling phone calls that stretched late into the night, filled with a nostalgic intimacy that surprised me. He spoke of his extra training, the rigorous preparations for his deployment overseas, emphasizing how demanding it was, how isolating it could feel. And then, he would pivot, his voice softening, telling me how much he missed our conversations, how much he regretted our separation, how he often thought of me while going through his daily routines, his words dripping with a calculated longing. He spun tales of loneliness, of how my presence had always brightened his toughest days, how I understood him in a way no one else did. Our interactions became intensely flirtatious, mirroring the exciting, giddy days of our initial courtship, but with a deeper, more mature undertone of shared history. He'd email me throughout the day, charming anecdotes mixed with earnest confessions of his rekindled feelings. He'd say things like, "I wish you were here, Piper. Just your voice makes this all feel less impossible." Or, "Thinking of you makes these long days shorter, brings a smile to my face." He never failed to ask about my day, about my work, showing a genuine, almost obsessive interest that I found incredibly endearing, lulling me into a false sense of security. It truly felt like a beautiful second chance, a quiet reignition of a flame I thought had long since been extinguished. We talked about the future, about what might happen when he returned from his deployment, envisioning a stronger, more mature relationship built on the foundation of our shared past and newfound wisdom. He painted vivid pictures of us exploring new towns, of quiet evenings spent together, of a life truly shared, a stable future where we could finally settle down. Not once, in all those months of renewed intimacy, did he ever breathe a single word about another woman. There was no mention of a casual date, let alone a serious girlfriend, an engagement, or incomprehensibly a marriage. He presented himself as a single man, yearning for a lost love, his focus seemingly entirely on me, leaving no room for doubt or suspicion. I was cautious, naturally having been through this before, but his persistence, the raw emotion he skillfully injected into his voice, the sheer volume and consistency of his communication, slowly eroded my skepticism. I found myself drawn back into his orbit, my heart opening once more, cautiously at first, then with increasing abandonment, foolishly believing in the sincerity of his words. I began to invest emotionally, planning for his return, envisioning myself sending him care packages filled with his favorite snacks, writing long, heartfelt letters to bridge the miles, imagining the day he would finally be back in my arms. This quiet, digital courtship unfolded over several months, weaving a delicate tapestry of hope and renewed expectation, each thread a testament to my profound trust. I believed wholeheartedly in his sincerity, in the depth of his seemingly rekindled affection. I offered him my trust, my vulnerability, my tenderness, believing it was reciprocated, earned through consistent effort and honest communication. The profound problem that was about to shatter my carefully constructed piece was this. The beautiful tapestry he had woven was a lie, each thread of affection spun from insidious deception. The comforting sense of security I had allowed myself to feel was a cruel mirage, a cruel joke played on my trusting heart. The man I was reconnecting with was a master of manipulation, his true intentions hidden beneath layers of carefully crafted charm, a predatory smile unseen. His betrayal would be swift and brutal, leaving me with a profound sense of dissatisfaction and an unshakable urge for justice, a thirst that would not be easily quenched. Mark, the supposed protagonist of my renewed love story, would swiftly be recast as my cunning and heartless nemesis, and his actions would force me to confront a darker side of human nature I had never imagined existed, a world where truth was merely a tool for control. The day of Mark's deployment was a crisp, clear autumn morning, the kind that Annapolis excels at, with a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and the distant salt tang of the Chesapeake Bay, a picture of tranquility that belied the storm brewing in my life. I wanted to be there to see him off, to offer a final hug, a gesture of support for the long months ahead, but his last email had been specific. He would be leaving from a secure military base hours away, with no visitors allowed. Still, I felt compelled to do something, a small, tangible gesture to acknowledge our rekindled connection and to wish him well, a final act of kindness before his departure. I decided to drive to the house he shared with his mother, Mrs. Jenkins, an imposing yet charming brick colonial on a tree-lined street that now felt strangely menacing. While not close friends, Mrs. Jenkins and I had always been on relatively good terms, exchanging pleasantries during my visits with Mark. My plan was to simply leave a small, thoughtful gift and a handwritten note for her on the porch swing, a quiet thank you for her past kindnesses, and a subtle message to Mark, through her, that I was thinking of him as he embarked on his journey. As I pulled my car up the quiet street, The house stood bathed in the soft morning light, appearing serene and untouched by the emotional complexities brewing beneath its surface, a facade of normalcy. There was no sign of Mrs. Jenkins, which wasn't unusual for a weekday morning. She often ran errands or attended community events. I carefully approached the front door, the small, elegantly wrapped package and my heartfelt note tucked safely in my hand, my heart aflutter with a mix of anticipation and melancholy. As I placed them gently on the porch swing, a fleeting detail caught my eye, a minor anomaly that, at the time, held no significant weight but would later become a searing point of reference. Parked conspicuously in the driveway was a sleek, dark blue sedan, utterly unfamiliar to me, its polished surface gleaming in the morning sun. My mind, ever the logical problem solver, quickly rationalized its presence. Mark's mother occasionally had distant relatives visit, or perhaps it belonged to one of the long-term renters who occupied the small apartment above their detached garage. It was dismissed as a casual observation, nothing more than a passing curiosity in an otherwise ordinary moment. I finished my quiet errand, a gentle sense of warmth spreading through me, believing I had performed a meaningful act of care and support. I drove away, my thoughts already drifting to Mark, to the upcoming months of deployment, to the letters and emails we would exchange, envisioning our reunion, the quiet joy of picking up where we had left off. This sense of hopeful anticipation would soon be brutally shattered, leaving behind nothing but bitter ashes. A mere 2 days later, the postman delivered a thick, off-white envelope to my apartment, its crisp edges feeling oddly menacing in my hand. The handwriting on the address was unmistakably Mrs. Jenkins, yet there was an unfamiliar rigidity to the penmanship, an almost aggressive slant to the letters that set my teeth on edge. My heart, typically steady, gave an uneasy flutter, a premonition of the storm to come. I tore open the seal with a growing sense of trepidation, and as I unfolded the heavy paper, a wave of sickening confusion washed over me, quickly followed by a chilling dread that settled deep in my stomach, turning my insides to ice. The letter was not a polite acknowledgement of my gift, nor was it a warm farewell message. It was a vicious, scathing attack, each word a venomous arrow dipped in righteous indignation, aimed directly at my very core, designed to inflict maximum pain. She accused me, in no uncertain terms, of being a manipulative harlot, of trying to cause immense problems for her son, of being a homewrecker. She used words like whore and scarlet woman, words that scorched my eyes as I read them, for sleeping with her son before marriage, implying a moral depravity that simply wasn't true. My mind reeled, trying desperately to comprehend the source of such vitriol, such unfounded, baseless accusations, a complete distortion of reality. And then, buried amidst her hateful tirade, was the phrase that landed like a physical punch to my gut, shattering my composure completely, forcing the air from my lungs. And to think you would try to interfere with my son and his new wife, new wife. The words echoed in my mind, vibrating with a horrifying, sickening clarity. New wife. My breath hitched in my throat, my hands trembling so violently that the letter threatened to slip from my grasp, my vision blurring with a sudden rush of tears. Mark had a wife. How could this be? I had absolutely no idea, not a single inkling. He had never once, not in any of our extensive calls, emails, or messages, breathed a word about another woman, let alone an engagement, or, incomprehensibly, a marriage. The revelation was a cold, brutal slap to the face, leaving me gasping for air, clutching at my chest as if to contain the pain. The sheer, overwhelming irony of Mrs. Jenkins's accusations was a bitter, nauseating twist that added insult to my profound injury, rubbing salt into an already raw wound. I remembered the whispered family secret, a story I'd heard years ago through casual conversation, about Mrs. Jenkins's own history. A shotgun wedding, a hurried, hushed ceremony years ago because she had been visibly pregnant with Mark before she walked down the aisle. Her self-righteous indignation, her moral outrage, was a thin, transparent veil for her own blatant, undeniable hypocrisy, a desperate attempt to deflect from her own past failings. My initial confusion, the shock of the unexpected, quickly morphed into a searing, white-hot anger that threatened to consume me whole, burning away all sense of reason. Every whispered word from Mark, Every tender email, every late-night phone call where he spoke of missing me and our future, now felt like a cruel, calculated lie, a deliberate act of emotional torture designed to extract maximum emotional investment. The future we had discussed, the hopes I had quietly nurtured for months, shattered into a million sharp, glittering fragments around me, leaving me exposed, bleeding, and utterly alone in my disillusionment. The betrayal was so profound, so utterly complete, that it left me breathless, gasping in a silent scream of agony and disbelief. My entire world turned upside down. I had been strung along, played for a fool, an unwitting pawn in a twisted, deceitful charade, a cruel game where my heart was the prize. My sensible, practical world, my meticulously constructed canvas of peace and predictability, had been ripped apart, not gently, but violently, leaving a gaping, festering wound where trust and affection once resided, a wound that would surely never fully heal. This was not merely a breakup. This was an emotional ambush, a deliberate act of psychological cruelty, an attack on my very sense of self-worth and my ability to judge character. I felt a surging wave of righteous indignation, a powerful, undeniable urge to retaliate, to expose the insidious duplicity that had poisoned my perception of reality, to tear down the elaborate facade he had so carefully constructed. Mark, my supposed rekindled love, was not just a liar. He was a master manipulator, a cheating scoundrel, a deceiver of the highest, most despicable order, a monster hiding in plain sight. And his mother, instead of being a voice of reason or compassion, had chosen to align herself with his deception, actively participating in my profound humiliation, doubling down on the lies, becoming an accomplice to his cruelty. They had created this devastating problem, a web of deceit that entangled me, and now, I was going to ensure they experienced the full, unfiltered, and utterly chaotic consequences of their vile actions, a retribution that would be undeniable. My quiet, orderly life was unequivocally over. The rules of the game had fundamentally changed, and I was no longer an innocent, passive bystander. I was a target, deeply wounded, yes, but now, fueled by a relentless, unquenchable fire, I would become the hunter, stalking my prey with cold, calculated precision. The sense of utter dissatisfaction with how things currently stood was a raging inferno within me, demanding not just solace, but profound, undeniable justice, a complete rebalancing of the scales. My nemesis was crystal clear. Mark, the architect of this deception, and anyone who had knowingly helped him maintain his intricate web of lies, starting with his own hypocritical mother. I would make absolutely sure they knew the true, unbearable cost of their deceit, paid in the currency of public shame and private turmoil. The raw, throbbing pain of betrayal gnawed at me for an entire day, consuming every waking moment, leaving me a hollowed-out shell of my former self. I couldn't bring myself to eat. The very thought of food turned my stomach into a churning knot. Sleep offered no escape, my mind replaying every sweet, insidious lie Mark had uttered, every flirtatious message, every hopeful conversation, each memory a fresh, agonizing stab to my wounded heart. The anger festered, a viscous, burning liquid bubbling just beneath the surface, threatening to erupt in an uncontrollable torrent of rage. I paced my small apartment, the familiar comfort of my home now feeling alien, tainted by the pervasive stench of deceit that had infiltrated every corner of my life, making the very air feel heavy and suffocating. My creative work, usually a boundless source of joy and escape, seemed utterly pointless, the vibrant colors of my digital palette muted and gray, mirroring the bleak landscape of my emotions. I tried to articulate the profound humiliation, the gut-wrenching betrayal to a close friend over the phone, but the words caught in my throat, choked by unshed tears and a profound sense of shame that burned my cheeks. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of his deception, coupled with his mother's vicious, unwarranted attack, fueled a new, steel-hard resolve within me. This wasn't merely about my hurt feelings, though they were raw and undeniable. This was about justice, about exposing a profound moral injustice that had violated my trust and my very sense of reality. They had chosen to play dirty, to lie and to shame, to inflict pain without compunction or remorse. And now, I, Piper Olson, was going to meticulously, deliberately, and irrevocably reveal the unvarnished truth, no matter the consequences. The seed of an idea, initially small and tentative, began to germinate in the fertile ground of my anger, growing swiftly into a fierce, unwavering determination that consumed my every thought. If they, his new wife and his enabling mother, truly did not know the full extent of his duplicity, they certainly should. And I, the woman he had so carelessly discarded and humiliated, was going to be the one to deliver that shattering revelation, a messenger of brutal truth. The first, most crucial step was to gather irrefutable proof, undeniable evidence that would leave no room for denial or doubt, no crack for his lies to slip through. I pulled out my old laptop, the very one Mark had occasionally used when he visited, the one where he had foolishly, or perhaps carelessly, left his email account logged in. A cold, surgical precision settled over me as I began sifting through months of our digital correspondence. Every email, every instant message, every text conversation that had blossomed between us, from the initial tentative messages to the most intimate confessions of rekindled affection, each one was a damning piece of evidence, a thread in the intricate tapestry of his lies. My fingers flew across the keyboard, scrolling through the endless stream of words, each word he'd once written now twisting into a cruel, sickening mockery of genuine emotion, making my stomach churn. I printed them all, page after page, the soft, rhythmic whir of my printer, a relentless counterpoint to the frantic pounding of my heart, creating a symphony of retribution. The stack of papers grew higher, a tangible monument to his lies, a thick, undeniable dossier of his deceit, heavy with the weight of betrayal. Emails detailing our future plans, texts filled with longing and promises, transcripts of calls where he'd expressed his deepest regrets and his ardent desire to be with me. The sheer volume of it was overwhelming, a stark testament to how deeply, how completely I had been ensnared in his elaborate, twisted charade. My stomach churned with a mixture of nausea and grim satisfaction as I reviewed each piece, remembering the context, the naive emotions I had felt, now replaced by a chilling clarity that left no room for sentimentality. I also contacted my phone provider, patiently navigating automated systems, enduring lengthy hold times, and speaking to multiple customer service representatives to obtain a detailed record of all calls between our numbers. I meticulously noted the dates, times, and durations of each conversation, especially those that coincided with the period he was supposedly engaged or already married, an undeniable timeline of his deception. This, too, would be irrefutable proof of our ongoing communication, a time-stamped record of his active deception that even he couldn't deny. Each document I collected, each fresh paper I added to the steadily growing pile, solidified my resolve. My actions were driven not by petty malice or vengeful spite, but by a chilling, undeniable clarity, a profound sense of righteous purpose, a burning desire for equilibrium. This was not merely revenge in the traditional sense. This was a deliberate unveiling of truth, a dismantling of a carefully constructed, deeply damaging lie, a quest for justice. I felt a strange calmness descend upon me, a quiet strength emerging from the wreckage of my trust, an almost spiritual clarity. The following day, armed with my formidable dossier of truth, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I needed to confirm the full scope of his betrayal, to ensure my carefully orchestrated plan would land with maximum impact, leaving no stone unturned. I decided to revisit Mark's mother's house, the very place where I had innocently left a gift days before, now a symbol of his deceit. My mind, now sharp and focused, revisited the image of the unfamiliar car in the driveway on deployment day. A cold, hard certainty began to form in my mind. If Mark was indeed married, and if his mother was so fiercely protective and quick to defend him, it was highly likely his new wife was already an integral part of their lives, perhaps even living under the same roof, breathing the same air as his deceitful mother. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me, but it also sharpened my focus, hunting my resolve to a razor-thin edge. I drove slowly down the familiar, tree-lined street, the very same street where I had once imagined a pleasant, peaceful future now seemed like the setting for a quiet drama. My heart throbbed a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a nervous drumbeat accompanying my steady approach. And there it was again, unmistakable, the sleek, dark blue sedan, still parked prominently in the driveway, as if a permanent fixture and enduring testament to the new reality. This time, however, my eyes were not merely registering its presence. They were drawn, almost magnetically, to the rear window. Scrawled across the glass in stark, white shoe polish were the telltale words, stark against the dark tint. Just married, congrats first name and first name. Names, though somewhat obscured by the angle, were clearly visible, undeniable, irrefutable proof of what I had only suspected. The confirmation sent a chill down my spine, a shiver that was part shock, part morbid satisfaction, a sense of dark destiny fulfilled. Not only had they just gotten married, but the continued presence of the car, weeks after the ceremony, screamed that his new wife was already living right there, in his mother's house, deeply embedded in their daily lives, inescapable. A slow, chilling smile touched my lips, a grim acknowledgement of the grim poetry of the situation, a silent nod to cosmic justice. Perfect. Absolutely, exquisitely perfect. Now Mrs. Jenkins would not only be forced to face the brutal, ugly truth of her son's duplicity, but she would also have to live, day in and day out, in the utter, inescapable chaos she had so actively helped create, under her own roof with no escape. The thought filled me with a grim satisfaction, a deep, abiding sense of poetic justice already beginning to unfold before my very eyes. My plan, once a nebulous concept swirling in the depths of my anger, solidified into a concrete, meticulously detailed strategy. I would send letters, 2 separate, carefully crafted letters, directly to his mother's house, ensuring maximum impact and inescapable delivery. The delivery method itself was critical. These revelations needed to be opened, and they needed to be opened without delay or avoidance. They simply had to be seen. I decided on sending them with a required signature, a seemingly innocuous detail that would force them to physically acknowledge receipt and practically guarantee immediate attention. This was a crucial tactical move, ensuring my meticulously prepared message wouldn't be lost in the shuffle of everyday mail or simply tossed aside unread. It would be impossible to ignore. The first letter, I decided, would be addressed directly to his new wife. My hands were steady as I carefully selected the most damning evidence from my burgeoning stack of printouts, arranging them chronologically to paint a clear, undeniable picture of Mark's calculated duplicity, a timeline of deceit. I laid it all out for her, every single detail of his secret flirtation with me, his whispered promises of a future together, his insidious emotional manipulation. Everything he had been doing behind her back, all while supposedly preparing for their wedding, or, shockingly, already being married to her. I included all the irrefutable receipts, the detailed phone call logs, the printed emails overflowing with tender words and declarations of affection, the chat logs where he'd expressed his longing for me, his regret over our past separation. Each page was a precise, undeniable fragment of the truth, presented without embellishment, allowing the cold, hard facts to speak for themselves, to resonate with unadulterated power. My voice in the letter was calm, factual, devoid of any emotional outburst or accusatory tone, which I believed would make it all the more chilling and credible, a detached presentation of utter betrayal. The truth, I knew, would be far more devastating than any emotional outburst. I simply stated the timeline of our renewed connection and presented the proof, leaving her to draw her own devastating conclusions, to connect the dots of his profound betrayal. The second letter, equally precise but far more pointed and cutting, was addressed to his lovely mother, Mrs. Jenkins. In this letter, I adopted a tone of cool detachment, cutting through her earlier accusations with surgical precision. I reminded her, in no uncertain terms, that during all the months I was intimately talking to her son, not once, not a single time, did he ever breathe a word about having a wife or even being engaged. This was a direct, irrefutable counter to her earlier, baseless claim that I was intentionally trying to cause trouble for a pre-existing, acknowledged relationship. I then delivered the most stinging, personal blow, a subtle but devastating reminder of her own blatant hypocrisy. I subtly recalled her own infamous shotgun wedding, the hasty, whispered ceremony years ago because she was already visibly pregnant with Mark. A historical fact I knew would hit exceptionally close to home, exposing her selective memory and her own past moral failings, making her own accusations ring hollow. I ended the letter with a quiet, yet profoundly powerful declaration, letting her know, unequivocally, that his wife now had a full, comprehensive, and undeniable account of precisely what her precious son had been up to. The implications were chillingly clear. The profound chaos she had so actively helped create, the deep-seated deception she had so readily enabled and defended, was now firmly ensconced within her own four walls, an inescapable reality she would have to face every single day, with nowhere to hide. I spent hours meticulously assembling the packages, my movements precise and deliberate. I double-checked every address, ensured every single page was in perfect order, and secured the envelopes with an almost obsessive care. My hands, which had trembled uncontrollably with raw pain and humiliation just days before, were now steady, imbued with an unshakable purpose. I felt a strange, profound sense of calm descend upon me, a quiet, almost spiritual satisfaction in the methodical execution of my plan. This was not a rash, impulsive act of rage. It was a carefully calculated, strategically executed move, each step designed to maximize impact and minimize collateral damage to anyone but the truly deserving parties. The act of actually mailing the letters felt momentous, a quiet, yet deeply powerful, act of rebellion against the injustice I had suffered. I drove to the bustling post office, my heart a relentless drumbeat in my chest, a rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet whir of the automated sorting machines. Handing over the two large envelopes to the postal clerk, patiently explaining the requirement for a signature confirmation, felt like a silent, yet profound, declaration of war. There was no turning back now. The die was irrevocably cast. The waiting began, a period of nervous anticipation that stretched agonizingly over the next day or so. I sent one final message, a digital phantom sent floating into the vast, unknowable ocean of the internet. It was a single, stark line, sent directly to Mark's email address, one that I still, miraculously, had access to from a time when he had carelessly used my old laptop and forgotten to log out. The words were simple, yet carried the weight of everything that had transpired. "You're dead to me." I wanted him to sweat, to know that I knew everything, and to wonder, agonizingly, what I was going to do. This was the final, devastating hook, leaving him dangling precariously in a void of uncertainty, a chilling prelude to the storm that was about to break around him, thousands of miles away. My heart ached, a deep, persistent throb of the wound he had inflicted, but beneath that familiar pain, a cold, hard resolve had taken root, unshakable and absolute. I would not be a mere victim. I would be the quiet, unseen architect of his consequences, a silent, omniscient observer to the chaos he had so carelessly sown. The wait for the inevitable fallout was excruciating, a slow, agonizing burn of anticipation. I couldn't distract myself. Every faint ping of my phone, every new email notification that flashed across my screen, sent a jolt of anxiety and excitement through my entire nervous system. I knew I had done everything I possibly could, that the trap was set, the bait taken. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for them to step fully into it. The hours crawled by, each minute feeling like an eternity, stretched thin by my heightened senses. I second-guessed myself repeatedly, wondering if I had gone too far, if this was truly the right path, if I was descending into a vindictive spiral. But then, the searing memory of Mrs. Jenkins's cruel, shamming letter, the clear image of Mark's smiling, deceptive face as he spun his intricate web of lies, would flood back, hardening my resolve, steeling my nerve. No, this was necessary. This was not only justified, but absolutely right. The lowest point, the feeling that all my efforts might be for naught, that all might be lost, was not in the meticulous execution of my plan, but in the lingering, suffocating uncertainty that followed. What if the letters, despite the required signature, were never opened? What if they simply chose to ignore them, to dismiss them as the ravings of a scorned woman, leaving me with an unfulfilled, echoing desire for closure? What if my meticulously crafted plan, my carefully aimed missile of truth, simply fizzled out, leaving me more wounded and exposed than before. This nagging, pervasive doubt, this profound fear of an anticlimactic end to such a monumental emotional investment, was the deepest low I experienced. I had poured so much emotional energy into this, taken such a bold, irreversible step, and the thought of it simply evaporating into nothingness was almost unbearable. I felt a profound sense of vulnerability, having laid bare his most damaging secrets without truly knowing if my efforts would resonate, if they would ignite the inferno I envisioned. It was a terrifying moment of suspended animation, where fierce hope and paralyzing fear wrestled for dominance in my weary, battered mind. My exhaustion was profound, a physical manifestation of the immense emotional turmoil I had endured. The crushing weight of his betrayal, coupled with the immense pressure of meticulously executing my elaborate plan, had left me utterly drained, emotionally and physically spent, leaving me teetering on the edge of a vast precipice, staring into an unknown, uncertain future. All I could do in that agonizing moment was simply wait, holding my breath for the first sign of the storm. Over the next day or so, my nerves were stretched taut, pulled thin like violin strings, vibrating with a tense, almost painful anticipation. Every creak of my apartment building, every distant siren wail from the Annapolis streets, made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. The waiting period was a living, breathing thing, a suffocating blanket of uncertainty that coiled in my stomach, making it impossible to focus on anything else, to eat, to sleep, to even think clearly beyond the singular focus of what was to come. I compulsively checked Mark's email account, the one he had carelessly left logged in on my old laptop, my finger hovering over the refresh button, constantly clicking, willing new messages to appear. It was a risky move, an invasion of privacy, but one I couldn't resist. I needed to see. I needed to witness the fallout with my own eyes to confirm that my carefully aimed shot had found its mark. The tension was almost unbearable, a suffocating weight on my chest, pressing down on my lungs, making each breath feel like a monumental effort. Then, in the quiet hum of my laptop, it happened. A new email notification appeared, a fresh, unread message in Mark's inbox. My heart leaped into my throat, a sudden, powerful surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, making my hands tremble uncontrollably. It was from his wife. I held my breath, a profound sense of grim satisfaction already building within me, a dark, heady brew of vindication. I clicked it open, the screen illuminating with her furious words. The subject line itself was a scream of fury, an explosion of anger and profound hurt, punctuated by multiple exclamation points and capital letters. The content of the email was even more potent, a torrent of accusations, a furious, heart-wrenching tirade of betrayal and disbelief. She had torn into him, her words dripping with a venomous mix of pain, rage, and a crushing sense of disillusionment. She recounted her discovery, how she had received and read everything, every sickening detail of his lies, every carefully presented piece of evidence I had painstakingly compiled. And then she dropped a bomb of her own, a detail that resonated deeply, confirming the brutal effectiveness of my comprehensive phone records. While on their honeymoon, a time that should have been sacred and joyous, he had left her side, claiming he was merely going to get ice, a flimsy, transparent excuse for his true purpose. And during that brief, deceptive absence, he had called me. Her email laid it bare, the precise timing, the shallow excuse, the undeniable, irrefutable evidence that my phone records had so clearly provided. The sheer audacity of his actions to be actively communicating with me, pursuing a romantic connection, making promises of a future, all while supposedly celebrating his brand new marriage, while on their honeymoon, was a level of depravity that even I, despite my anger, hadn't fully grasped. The email was a furious, heart-wrenching testament to her pain, a raw, unfiltered outpouring of shock, righteous indignation, and profound disillusionment. She called him a monster, a despicable liar, every derogatory name imaginable, her words echoing with the agony of a woman utterly betrayed. She questioned everything about their relationship, their rushed wedding, his sincerity, his love, his very character. Her pain, though directly caused by him, was palpable, a tangible thing that radiated from the screen, and for a fleeting, almost paradoxical moment, I felt a pang of something akin to sympathy for her, for the innocent party caught in his destructive web. But the overwhelming, undeniable feeling that quickly superseded any fleeting pity was one of profound, absolute vindication. My plan had worked. The truth, ugly and undeniable, had landed with devastating force, igniting the inferno I had meticulously prepared. And then, just minutes after the first email, another appeared, popping up in Mark's inbox with a jarring chime. This one was from his mother, Mrs. Jenkins. Her subject line was equally enraged, though tinged with a distinct, almost desperate note of self-preservation and utter exasperation. I clicked on it, my heart still thrumming with the adrenaline of triumph. This email was a masterpiece of maternal disappointment and fury, directed squarely at her son, not for his moral failing, but for the messy, inconvenient, and utterly inescapable consequences it had brought directly to her doorstep. She was ripping him a new one, not necessarily for the cheating itself, but for the profound disruption and public embarrassment his infidelity was causing under her meticulously ordered roof. She complained bitterly, vehemently, that she now had to deal with his entire chaotic mess, under her own roof, day in and day out. Her precious daughter-in-law, his new wife, was crying incessantly, beside herself with grief and shock, utterly inconsolable, and had locked herself in her room, refusing to come out, refusing to eat, refusing to face the world. Mrs. Jenkins lamented the destroyed wedding, the ruined honeymoon, the shattered illusion of her son's perfect new life, all because of his despicable actions. The inescapable fact that the wife was there, living in her house, meant Mrs. Jenkins was truly experiencing the full, immediate, and utterly unavoidable fallout of her son's deception. She was pissed, absolutely furious, not just at him, but at the immense inconvenience and profound emotional upheaval his infidelity had wrought upon her meticulously ordered household, her quiet, respectable life. She couldn't escape it. She had to deal with the weeping bride, the incessant questions, the accusations hanging heavy in the air, the palpable, suffocating tension that now permeated every corner of her once peaceful home. The delicious irony of the situation was almost too much for me to bear, a bitter-sweet concoction that tasted like victory. She, the woman who had so venomously accused me of causing problems, of being a whore, of interfering, was now knee-deep in the very problems she had tried to blame me for, problems created entirely by her own duplicitous son, problems she was now irrevocably forced to confront directly, hour after agonizing hour, day after day. The thought brought a wave of pure, unadulterated satisfaction, a deep, resonant hum of vindication that settled in my very bones. This was the front-row seat I had been promised, the very thing the original Reddit post had hinted at, the ultimate, undeniable proof of the chaos I had meticulously orchestrated. It was glorious, a chef's kiss moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. Since Mark had already deployed, thousands of miles away across oceans and continents, there was absolutely nothing he could do. He was physically trapped, isolated by distance, and the rigid structure of military service, a powerless bystander to the agonizing, public unraveling of his carefully constructed lies. He couldn't suddenly come home to smooth things over, to offer flimsy excuses in person, to charm his way out of the mess with a deceptive smile. He couldn't even physically confront his furious wife or his exasperated mother. All he could do is sit with it, stew in the bitter, undeniable consequences of his actions, isolated by an insurmountable distance and the unyielding demands of his military duties. I watched, fascinated and utterly engrossed, as he tried to scramble and explain himself in email after email, each one more desperate and pathetic than the last. His initial responses were a pathetic mix of denial and deflection, attempting to minimize his actions, to somehow twist the narrative, to paint me as a crazed ex-girlfriend. He blamed the distance, the stress of deployment, the misunderstanding of our renewed connection. But the evidence I had so painstakingly provided was too overwhelming, too meticulously detailed, too irrefutable. His wife was beyond appeasement, her hurt too deep, her anger too consuming to be assuaged by his hollow words. His mother, caught between her son's obvious deceit and a furious new daughter-in-law living under her roof, was equally unwilling to accept his facile, transparent explanations. The email chain became a fascinating, ongoing psychological drama, unfolding before my very eyes. He tried begging, then gaslighting, attempting to twist her perception of reality, then back to abject apologies, promising anything and everything if she would just listen. He promised to make it better, to change, to prove himself worthy of her trust, to rebuild their shattered marriage. But his words were hollow, lacking any real substance or impact when delivered from halfway across the world, unable to be supported by action. His attempts to mend the gaping chasm he had created were pitiful, desperate flailings in the face of undeniable truth, like a drowning man grasping at straws. This agonizing, drawn-out process went on for months. Not just days, not weeks, but months of back-and-forth email exchanges. I continued to log into his email account sporadically, a silent, unseen, omniscient observer to the protracted, painful implosion of his marriage and his strained relationship with his mother. The emails never stopped coming from his wife, filled with continued anguish, bitter resentment, and unwavering mistrust. And his mother's emails, though perhaps less frequent as the novelty of the drama wore off, continued to be laden with complaints about the ongoing tension, the immense emotional toll, the constant crying, the bitter, suffocating silence that had descended upon her once peaceful home. Mark's responses became increasingly frantic, increasingly desperate, reflecting his growing impotence and despair, his voice in text becoming thin and reedy, devoid of its former charm. He was trapped, utterly and completely, in a hell of his own making, a gilded cage of consequences from which there was no escape. It was a slow-motion car crash, unfolding in agonizing detail, and I, Piper Olson, had the very best seat in the house. The satisfaction I felt was immense, a deep, abiding sense of justice served, a profound internal validation. It wasn't about him suffering for suffering's sake. It was about the truth being revealed, about his carefully constructed facade crumbling, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and facing the raw, unfiltered consequences of his own manipulative, deceitful actions. This was not about revenge in the petty sense. It was about seeing the natural, undeniable repercussions of his profound moral failings unfold precisely as they should, without my further direct intervention. I don't know if they ever officially got divorced. The flurry of emails eventually tapered off, becoming less frequent, then stopping altogether as his deployment neared its end, or perhaps as they found a new, more private way to communicate, or simply, mercifully, gave up the fight. My access to his email account eventually ceased, either because he finally changed his password, or because some internal military or email security protocol finally caught up to his prolonged period of inaction and my illicit access. But honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if their marriage, despite its apparent endurance, dissolved entirely in the quiet privacy of their own lives, or at the very least, was permanently scarred, irrevocably damaged by the profound betrayal that had marked its very beginning. The emotional wreckage I had witnessed firsthand was too severe, too deep-seated, too pervasive for a quick and easy recovery. The wounds he had inflicted on his wife, and the subsequent disruption to his mother's life, were surely too extensive to ever truly heal without leaving significant, lasting scars. My mission was complete. I had achieved what I set out to do: expose the truth, dismantle the intricate web of lies, and ensure that the architect of my pain faced the full, unfiltered, and unavoidable consequences of his profoundly deceitful actions. The anger that had once consumed me, that white-hot fury that had driven my meticulous plan, slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of peace. My world, once shattered into a million painful fragments, slowly began to reassemble itself, piece by piece, into something stronger, more resilient, something undeniably mine. I learned a profound, enduring lesson about trust, about discernment, about the subtle, almost imperceptible red flags that I had previously overlooked in my eagerness to believe in the inherent good in people. I learned that an open heart, while a beautiful thing, could sometimes be mistaken for weakness, and that some people devoid of conscience would ruthlessly exploit that vulnerability without a second thought. My empathy, once a boundless, flowing river, now had carefully constructed banks, guiding its flow more cautiously, more discerningly. I continued my fulfilling work as a freelance graphic designer in Annapolis, but my entire approach to life had subtly, yet fundamentally, shifted. I was more guarded, yes, more cautious in my interactions, but also significantly more confident in my own judgment, more assertive in protecting my personal boundaries. The entire experience, though agonizingly painful at the time, had forged a new, unbreakable strength within me. A quiet, formidable power born of having faced profound betrayal head-on and emerging victorious, not through direct destruction, but through the strategic, surgical revelation of truth. I didn't seek out new romantic relationships right away, preferring to focus on nurturing my flourishing career, exploring new avenues in my art, and deepening the genuine connections I had with my steadfast friends and supportive family. I found immense joy in the simple things: a liberating morning run along the sun-drenched Annapolis waterfront, the rich, comforting aroma of coffee from my favorite local shop, the quiet satisfaction of completing a challenging design project for a client who truly appreciated my vision. I was fulfilled, not by the act of revenge itself, but by the undeniable, irrefutable justice that had been served, by the restoration of my own sense of agency and dignity. Life in Annapolis continued its steady, familiar rhythm, but I was no longer the same Piper Olson who had once believed in the gentle, predictable unfolding of future happiness. I was stronger, wiser, and profoundly more aware of the intricate complexities of human nature, acknowledging both its chilling capacity for cruelty and its surprising, resilient capacity for healing and growth. Years passed, flowing like the steady tides of the Chesapeake Bay. My freelance design business flourished beyond my wildest dreams, allowing me to finally achieve a long-held goal: buying a charming little row house in a quieter, more secluded part of Annapolis, closer to the serene waterfront. It was a place that felt truly mine, a sanctuary meticulously decorated with my own art and a growing collection of unique finds, a space unburdened by past shadows or lingering anxieties. I even started dadding again, cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence and an undeniable lightness of spirit, drawn to genuine kindness, unwavering transparency, and authentic connection. My heart had healed, the deep wounds of betrayal having transformed into subtle, silver scars, reminders of a past battle, but no longer throbbing, debilitating aches. Life was good, rich with purpose and quiet joy. One unusually warm autumn afternoon, several years after the events that had irrevocably altered the course of my life, I found myself at the bustling outdoor farmers' market by the city dock. The air was alive with the vibrant symphony of activity, the cheerful chatter of vendors, the melodic strumming of a local folk band, the intoxicating scent of roasted nuts mingling with the crisp, earthy aroma of autumn produce and blooming chrysanthemums. I was happily browsing, reaching for a bushel of crisp, ruby-red apples, admiring their glossy perfection, when a familiar voice, deep and vaguely annoying yet undeniably recognizable, drifted over the animated crowd. "Mom, are we almost done? I thought we were getting lunch, not a tour of the entire vegetable patch." My hand, midair as I was about to select an apple, froze instantly. It was Mark. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden, sharp intake of air. I hadn't seen him, or heard anything about him, in years, not since my email access had been cut off and his deployment had ended. I slowly turned, my eyes scanning the throng of people, my gaze cutting through the various vendors and shoppers. And there he was, looking undeniably older, a little heavier, his face etched with a few more lines of what looked like quiet discontent. He stood next to a woman who was undeniably Mrs. Jenkins, her hair now streaked with more silver, her face a little more gaunt, etched with deeper lines that spoke of unseen burdens. And then I saw her, standing patiently beside Mark, pushing a sleek stroller with a small, quiet toddler bundled cozily inside, was the woman I had once only known, intimately, as his new wife. She looked different. Her once vibrant eyes, which had burned with fury and despair in my mind's eye as I read her emails, now held a weary resignation, a quiet, almost profound sadness that seemed to dim their natural sparkle. Her smile, as she glanced down at the innocent toddler, was fleeting, almost forced, a muscle memory rather than genuine joy. The names scrawled in white shoe polish on the back of that car, the furious, heart-wrenching emails, the endless nights of silent tears I had imagined her shedding, it all flashed through my mind in an instant, a rapid montage of past chaos. They were still together. The marriage had endured, or at the very least, the formal structure of it had. But the way she carried herself, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way she instinctively kept a slight distance from Mark, the undeniable lack of warmth or affection exchanged between them, spoke volumes. It wasn't a picture of happiness, of a couple who had overcome adversity and emerged stronger. It was a silent, living tableau of quiet, enduring damage, a testament to a connection forged in deceit and perhaps maintained out of resignation. As Mark turned his head to murmur something to his mother, his wife's eyes, almost imperceptibly, shifted. Her gaze swept across the bustling crowd, a vacant, almost distant look, and for a split second it landed directly on me. Our eyes met across the crowded market. There was no explicit recognition, no sudden spark of understanding, no dramatic, cinematic confrontation. She simply looked at me, a complete stranger in the crowd with that same weary sadness in her eyes, a reflection of burdens I could only guess at. Then her gaze moved on, lost in the vibrant sea of anonymous faces. But in that brief, fleeting moment, something profound, something unspoken, passed between us, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement of a shared, hidden history, of a silent suffering she had endured, a suffering I had unwittingly, yet purposefully, helped to expose. A small, almost imperceptible tremor touched her lips, a fraction of a second where her carefully constructed facade seemed to crack, as if something deep within her subconscious recognized the unseen hand that had once set her world ablaze. She didn't know who I was, not truly, not my name or my face, but her subconscious, perhaps, held the lingering, haunting echo of the profound chaos I had once helped unleash. The consequence, it seemed, was not always as expected, nor always as clean-cut as one might hope. They hadn't divorced. But the true victory for me wasn't necessarily in their separation, but in the permanent, indelible, visible mark of the truth on their lives, a consequence that lingered, quietly festering, a private, personal inferno that continued to burn, years after I had lit the match and walked away. My revenge, my act of revealing truth, wasn't a destructive force that tore them apart completely. Rather, it was an enlightening one, an act of clarity that bound them together, yes, but forever burdened by his profound deceit, forever living with the echoes of that initial, shattering betrayal. And for Piper Olson, the woman who had once navigated her life with serene predictability, that was a chillingly poetic justice, a final, unexpected thrill that lingered, a quiet triumph that permeated the crisp autumn air long after I had chosen my apples and walked away from the bustling market, into my beautifully ordered new life, my heart feeling lighter, truly free, knowing I had played my unique part in a story far grander and more intricate than I could have ever imagined. A story where the truth, no matter how painful, always found a way to surface, leaving its indelible, undeniable mark on all involved.